In the kingdom of Winterglen, where frost clung to the castle's stone walls and the dawn sky shimmered in shades of pearly blue, the queen sat by her window, sewing a gown embroidered with silver thread. As snowflakes drifted softly outside, she pricked her finger on the needle. A single drop of blood fell onto the snow on her windowsill, glowing like a ruby on white velvet. The queen sighed gently, whispering a wish carried by the cold wind. "May I have a daughter with skin as white as snow, lips as red as the drop of blood, and hair as black as the deepest winter night." She had spoken the words before, but this time the snow seemed to stop midair, as if listening. Months passed, and Winterglen prepared for the long season of frozen rivers and quiet nights. When the snow fell on the eve of the winter festival, the queen gave birth to a daughter, the most beautiful child the kingdom had ever seen. Her tiny hands were pale and delicate, her lips rosy as the sunset in winter, and her soft curls dark as raven feathers. The king declared her name Snow White, honoring the wish that had brought her into the world. Her birth filled the castle with music, bells, and a gentle warmth that defied the icy season. Snow White's early years were filled with laughter echoing through the stone halls. Though the queen grew ill shortly after her birth, she spent every waking moment singing to her daughter. The songs were soft, lullaby-like melodies, tales of moonlit forests, brave hearts, and the warmth of family. Snow White would rest against her mother's chest, tiny fingers tangled in the queen's gown as she listened to every note. Yet, even as those songs grew quieter, they left a tenderness in Snow White's heart that no winter wind could ever steal. After the queen passed away, the kingdom mourned, but no one grieved more quietly than the king. For years he avoided lonely halls by spending time with his daughter, reading her stories, guiding her through the gardens, and teaching her the old songs of Winterglen. But as time stretched on, the king eventually remarried, choosing a beautiful noblewoman whose elegance was matched only by her fierce ambition. She arrived with a mirror framed in obsidian and silver, an heirloom that, though stunning, unsettled the castle servants who claimed its glass seemed alive. Snow White grew into a girl loved by everyone. From the castle cooks who slipped her warm bread on chilly mornings to the gardeners who taught her how to protect delicate winter blossoms. She sang the songs her mother once sang, her voice soft yet bright, able to warm the air like sunlight. But her stepmother watched her with eyes that hid storms, eyes that lingered too long on Snow White's beauty and the affection she received from the kingdom. Though the queen wore a smile of perfect grace, Snow White sometimes sensed the way the air changed when she entered the room, as if the cold grew sharper around her.
The following days fell into a rhythm neither Thomas nor the dog could have predicted. At dawn, when the first pale light crept through the mist, Thomas would step outside with his mug of coffee in hand, and the dog would be waiting, never too close, but always near enough to show it hadn't left. The sight became oddly comforting, a reassurance that each day would not begin in complete solitude. By the third morning, Thomas had even set aside a small portion of his breakfast before sitting down, sliding it across the porch boards with the quiet expectation that it would be eaten. Without fail, the dog would inch forward, pause silent against the wood, and accept the offering with a wag of its tired tail. Thomas found himself speaking more often, narrating the smallest tasks aloud. When he repaired the fence posts, he would glance at the dog and mutter, "Strong enough to keep the deer out." When he stacked firewood, he'd say, "We'll need this come winter." The dog tilted its head, ears perked, as though listening with genuine interest. Once or twice, Thomas even caught himself chuckling at the absurdity of it, holding conversations with an animal that never spoke back. And yet, the cabin that had once been suffocatingly silent now seemed filled with a quiet companionship, like a long-forgotten melody returning to his life. By the end of the week, the distance between them began to shrink. The dog no longer lingered at the far edge of the porch but curled up against the steps, head resting lazily on its paws. When Thomas reached out one evening, palm open and still, the dog flinched at first but then, with a hesitant bravery, pressed its nose against his hand. The fur was coarse, the breath warm, and the moment fleeting, but for Thomas, it carried the weight of trust being born. He whispered softly, "Good boy," and the dog's ears twitched at the words, as though they were something it hadn't heard in a very long time. That night, the weather shifted. Clouds gathered like thick blankets across the sky, muting the stars. The air grew heavy with the scent of rain, and a distant rumble of thunder rolled across the hills. Thomas stacked extra logs by the hearth and lit the fire early, while the dog paced nervously outside. When the first drops fell, the animal hovered at the door, uncertain whether it was welcome. Thomas didn't hesitate. He opened the door wider and simply said, "Come in." The dog stepped across the threshold for the first time, shaking droplets from its fur, and lay quietly by the hearth as if it had always belonged there. As the storm beat against the windows and the fire cast its flickering warmth, Thomas found himself studying the way the dog had curled so peacefully on the rug. The soft, steady breathing filled the space that had once echoed with emptiness. He realized, with a sudden ache in his chest, that the dog had not only crossed into his home but into his life. And while the storm raged outside, inside there was calm, a man and a dog, sharing a roof, beginning a story neither had expected but both had needed. The air inside the cabin had grown heavy, damp, as though the storm had crept through the walls and now pressed against their skin. Every candle flame bent toward the mirror, stretching as though drawn by some unseen current. The glass no longer looked solid, it swirled faintly, like the surface of dark water disturbed by unseen hands. None of them wanted to say it, but they all felt the same thing, that whatever had been watching was no longer confined to the other side. Mara's voice cracked as she whispered, "We should cover it, break it, something." She grabbed the nearest blanket and hurled it at the mirror. For a heartbeat, relief flickered through the group as the glass disappeared behind thick fabric. But the blanket didn't fall. It clung unnaturally to the frame, pulled tight against the surface as if being drawn in. Then, slowly, it began to sink into the glass itself. Devon swore and stumbled back, nearly knocking over a candle. "It's eating it," he said, his voice hollow with disbelief. Alex grabbed the lantern, raising it high. The flame inside sputtered violently, but it cast just enough light to reveal something seeping from beneath the blanket, long, blackened fingers, curling over the mirror's wooden frame. The group froze, paralyzed as a hand pressed outward, stretching the fabric as if testing the barrier. The wood creaked, straining, as though the mirror were no longer just a reflection, but a doorway. Claire clutched Alex's arm, her nails digging into his skin. "It's coming through," she whispered, her words quivering like a prayer left unanswered. Then, as if mocking their fear, the rocking chair in the corner moved again, but this time it didn't creak forward or back. It slid. Slowly, deliberately, across the wooden floor, scraping toward the group without anyone touching it. Mara let out a broken sob. "It knows we can't leave," she choked. "It wants us here." The sound of rain outside hammered louder, deafening, as though the storm itself wanted to smother what was happening inside, and then, silence. The rain stopped, the thunder ceased, and the cabin was swallowed by a stillness so unnatural it hurt. The only sound was the faint rasp of nails dragging against wood, coming from the mirror's frame. Something was here now, no longer trapped behind glass, no longer a shadow in the corner. The cabin wasn't just haunted. It had been claimed.
The cottage groaned as the shadow deepened, stretching from corner to corner like a living veil. Aurelan felt the temperature drop until his breath came out in a fragile mist, no longer golden but pale and thin under the amulet's suppression. Sir Kaelin's sword gleamed, but the light bent strangely around it as though the darkness were swallowing its shine. "Stay behind me," Kaelin barked, though his voice trembled. The shadow pulsed once, twice, and then a faint silhouette began to form within it. A presence. A watcher. Something that had waited years for this moment. Maribel acted first. With a swift motion, she carved a glowing symbol in the air using a wand made of woven metal strands. The mark burst with white blue light, momentarily forcing the shadows to recoil like smoke dragged away by wind. "This realm is not yours," she shouted. But the shadows only whispered in response, voices layered atop one another, forming a chilling harmony. "He grows. He shines. He is ours." The words slithered into Aurelan's ears, bypassing sound entirely and pressing into the very core of his being. His knees weakened. They were speaking directly to him. The shadow surged forward, lashing out with tendrils that froze whatever they touched. Kaelin slashed one apart, but another grabbed his arm, sending a wave of dark frost crawling up his skin. Aurelan's instinct flared. He wanted to shout, to command the darkness to release his friend. But his voice, even dimmed, was dangerous. Maribel had warned him that using it carelessly could draw more Voidspeakers or make him vulnerable. Yet watching Kaelin sink to one knee, teeth gritted in pain, Aurelan felt something inside him snap. He had spent his life fearing his gift. Now, fear could destroy the people he cared about. Aurelan tore off the amulet. It clattered to the floor, and the golden radiance of his breath burst forth with incredible force, more brilliant than ever. The room filled with swirling light, warm, fierce, alive. The shadows shrieked, recoiling instantly as if burned. Aurelan stepped forward, voice trembling but resolute. "You will not touch them." The words glowed brighter, forming streams of shimmering gold that cut through the darkness like blades. The cottage shook violently. Maribel shielded her eyes. Kaelin watched in stunned awe as Aurelan's voice, long held back, unleashed its true power for the first time. But the power came with a price. As the shadows dissolved, Aurelan felt an invisible pull, as though something was trying to tug a part of him into the void. His limbs felt heavy, his thoughts cloudy. Maribel rushed to his side, gripping his shoulders. "They're trying to drag you through," she warned. The final remnants of the shadow hissed in retreat, leaving behind a fractured silence. Aurelan dropped to his knees, breath ragged and glowing. "This was only one of them," Maribel said grimly. "More will come. They have tasted your light." Aurelan nodded weakly. The time for hiding was over. The fight for his voice and his destiny had begun. Aurelan awoke at sunrise, still weak but steadier than the night before. Maribel had brewed potions to steady his spirit, and Kaelin, now recovering from the frostbite, watched him with protective determination. "The Voidspeakers won't stop," Maribel warned. "They will keep coming until they claim you." Aurelan understood now that running or hiding was no longer an option. If he didn't confront them, Valedore itself would be put at risk. With newfound resolve, he declared, "Then we face them on my terms." It was the first time he spoke of his gift not with fear, but with purpose. Maribel led them to an ancient stone clearing deep in the woods, known as the Echo Circle, a place where the barrier between realms was thin. "If you call them here," she instructed, "you can face them at full strength. Your voice will resonate through the circle's stones, amplifying your light." The thought of willingly summoning the Voidspeakers chilled Aurelan, yet he felt a strange calm settle over him. For the first time, he was choosing when and how they would confront him. Kaelin tightened his gloves, ready for whatever would come. "We stand with you, my prince," he said, voice firm. Aurelan stepped into the center of the circle, took a deep breath, and spoke a single word, "Enough." The sound rang out like a bell of warm gold, shifting the air until ripples spread across the clearing. The ground hummed. The sky dimmed. And then, from the forest's shadows, the Voidspeakers emerged more than before, swirling like living ink caught in a silent storm. Their voices layered together in a chilling chorus, He calls. He shines. He is ours. The stone pillars vibrated with their power. But Aurelan didn't waver. His heart pounded, but clarity burned within him. He was not calling them in surrender, but in challenge. They lunged forward, tendrils reaching, their forms twisting into looming shapes. Aurelan stood tall. His voice, once suppressed and feared, rose like a force of nature. You will not rule me. You will not touch my kingdom. The words blazed gold, erupting into radiant waves that tore through the clearing. The light wasn't just brightness, it was warmth, memory, hope. It carried every moment of kindness Aurelan had ever spoken, every truth he had ever cherished. The Voidspeakers shrieked, recoiling as their forms cracked like shattered glass. One by one, they dissolved into fragments, swallowed by the brilliance they had long sought to consume. Silence returned, broken only by Aurelan's steady breathing. The light slowly faded, settling into a soft glow that lingered around him like dawn mist. Maribel approached with a rare smile. Your voice is not a curse, she said quietly. It is your strength and your destiny. Kaelin helped him stand, a shining in his eyes. Aurelan felt lighter, freer, no longer burdened by the fear of his own abilities. When he returned to Valedore, the kingdom welcomed him not just as their prince, but as a protector whose voice carried the courage of 1,000 hearts. For the first time, Aurelan believed it, and so, the prince with the golden mouth stepped into his future, not feared, not hunted, but finally understood.